All right, welcome into the Autzen Audibles podcast live stream edition. All three of us are on the show. I'm Matt Preem, Eric Scopel, Jared Mack joining us. Kudos to you guys. Everything is intact. Everything is here. We're good. First time in about a week. All three of us have been on the show. I've been on vacation, so that's why I was gone. I do not have a sleeve tattoo.
What?
Quite the
Matt,
Allegedly.
how dare you lie to these people? Don't misinform them.
I was telling Jared at the basketball game yesterday, Eric, that I was really close to going on Amazon and buying those like sleeves.
Oh, you should have done that. You should have done that.
And just been like, hey, here it is.
You should have done that. It would have been great.
Go to the desert, come back with a huge sleeve. But on today's show, we're gonna go basketball. Both the men and the women are taking interesting turns to their seasons. One's going up, one's going down, and it's probably not the team that you expect. And then on the back end of the show, we'll also talk some football. We'll answer your guys' questions as well. Eric, let's start with the women. I think this is the more this is the more surprising of the two, I think, because going in like a month ago, they were a top 25 team. They were playing for an opportunity to host the regionals. Mm-hmm. And now, correct me if I'm wrong here, but if they're not careful, they may play their way out of the tournament.
No, I don't need to correct you at all, because that's right. It's been a weird turn here, because you're right in terms of the two ships kind of passing each other in the night. While the women's team has completely kind of gone on the decline, the men's team is on the incline, which is why I thought we want to start with the good stuff. But we'll start with some of the less good stuff. The women are in a really tough place right now from a lot of perspectives, but I guess I was trying to think of where to go.
Hard to think of just one, right?
I was kind of like, well, in the conference they're 5-7, so they're in 8th place, which is this is the first time that Kelly Graves' coached Oregon team has been below 500 in the Pac-12 since Sabrina's first year. So this is uncharted waters for them in that regard. And then in terms of the NCAA tournament, they've made it every year since Sabrina's freshman year, and I think things are kind of dire right now. They've only won 14 games. They've got opportunities undoubtedly down the stretch here to get in. I mean, they're 19th in the net right now. So you're not talking about a team that, is struggling from the computer perspective, but it's hard to ignore the fact that they are 5-7 in conference play. They've lost 8 of 12 games. They've lost 3 in a row. Haven't been blown out really all season. They've been competitive in basically every single game. Like, they've had opportunities every fourth quarter that they've lost to maybe pick up a victory, but end of the day, they haven't won games, and you look up and you go, they're 14-9, I believe, right now, going into the kind of the closing stretch of the season. And as Kelly Graves said on Wednesday when we interviewed him, they've got 6 games in conference to go, and they probably need to win at least 3 of those games to avoid being a situation where you're playing for your tournament life in the conference tournament in Las Vegas. So certainly a path there. They're currently in the field as a 9 seed according to Charlie Krem, who's the ESPN women's bracket expert. So, it's not like they're out of the field right now, but they are also in a spot where they certainly have wins to do. You're not going to put a team in with 14 wins in the NCAA tournament. So they have to win games, and they have to win. I think I agree with Kelly. I think he's right. I think if they were to win 3 or 4 of these final 6 and let's say get a win down in Las Vegas, you'd probably be in the field fairly comfortably, but only as a 7 or 8 seed. For them to be anything better than that, they basically need to run the table. They've got good games in front of them on the schedule, but these are also games that, like, based on how they were playing, I don't think you expect that. There's no anticipation like, oh, this is a for sure win. Like, every game on the schedule, with the exception of senior day against Arizona State, you go, gosh, that could go the other way.
Yeah, to me, they've been wildly inconsistent. I feel like the only person you can really rely on to get you any shade of anything is India Rogers. And, she can only do so much. And she has had some just tremendous performances over the season, most of them resulting in wins, but some of them, even though she just comes up a little bit short. They just need somebody along with, I guess, Grace Van Sluten to be a consistent 16 to 20 point scorer, or at least even 14 to 18. It's tough to rely on Tina Paopao to really get you anything more than 14 points in a recent stretch of games.
That's the issue. Is she's been
right. She can't
awful.
shoot. Terrible. Yeah, she's regressed a lot in the last couple of weeks.
Can we get into this? Sorry, Jared.
This is one of my main points I was going to bring up because she's not helping, and I don't want to sound overly critical here, but when you have these high of expectations with a program that with Sabrina was a Final Four and national title contender, these should be the expectations of your program, and people and the team itself have fallen short a lot of the time.
So this is where it gets weird. Is on Sunday, James Kripke, the Oregonian, asked Kelly Graves about Pau. Is there something physically wrong? And he said, no, it's not physical. It's mental. It's a slump. And then 24 hours later, James went up to Portland for a WNBA expansion meeting with the WNBA commissioner. Representatives from Oregon and Oregon State were there. Former WNBA players were there. All sorts of people. And he talked to Kelly there. And on the record, Kelly then said that she is dealing with an injury and she isn't physically right, but she's getting it out, and a lot of credit to her for doing so. So I don't really know, because in a 24-hour span, I'll just, I guess, choose to believe that there was an injury that maybe he wasn't comfortable disclosing on Sunday, that he talked to Tahina and felt more comfortable disclosing on Monday. But it is a weird deal where, I was talking to James about this, going like, wait, I thought, like, how did this happen? Because I chat with him on Wednesday, like, right. A couple of days ago, she said she was fully healthy, and this was kind of more of a mental obstacle than a physical one. If it's a physical one, it I think opens a little bit more sympathy for, not that there isn't sympathy for a player who's maybe having a hard time mentally and kind of in a slump, but there is more for one if, like, let's say she has a nagging knee injury she's playing through, and remember, she has a history with these knee problems, and that was part of the reason she wasn't a consensus 5-star recruit coming out of high school, because her sophomore and junior seasons were lost to ACL injuries. So part of me wonders, like, if she's having knee problems here, like, this just might be something you can't really avoid. And maybe we can be a little bit less harsh on her if that's actually the case, because statistically over these last 6 games, it's been dreadful. I mean, you look at her field goal percentage, it's below 20% for about the last 2 or 3 weekends in a row now. And Oregon's losing games in part because they can't get anything offensively from her. So, she hasn't made more than 2 field goals in a game in 3 games. Yeah, and it's been. She's only made 1 3 in 3 games. Mm-hmm. And I just looked at it right now because, like, I knew she was in a slump, but I didn't realize it was this bad. This is the first time she's ever had 3 straight games without scoring double digits. Like, the only time it happened once with 2 last year, and it happened a couple times of 2 in a row as a freshman, but there's definitely something off with her game, and it's impacting her. I mean, I was talking with James actually last night as we were leaving the arena from the men's game, and I mentioned to James that it feels like from afar, maybe you guys have covered more of these games than I have. Yeah. But it seems like from afar, like, too many players have been asked to play above their expected role at the beginning of the year, and then maybe they're hitting that wall where it's just too much is being asked of them night in, night out, and it's unfair to ask those players to continue doing this, and that's why we're seeing the slump. Like I referenced Filipina Che. Like, she's not supposed to be an offensive threat. She's not supposed to be someone that's playing more than 15 minutes a game this season, and she's having to play 30 because they don't have another low post option. There's a lot of issues with the way the roster was constructed, and again, this is where I probably shielded Kelly from some criticism in the past, but this is one where I think he's opened it for himself. And I know there's been some bad luck, but they started the season with 11 scholarship players. 2 of those players are no longer on the roster. You're playing with 9. Mm-hmm. Any holes you have are going to be much more egregious, much more obvious when you have so few players to kind of handle things with. And that's where they're at right now. You're right, Jared. Like, India Rogers is the only reliable offensive player, and she's even had a couple of games where it hasn't been right. I don't know how much. And that makes it even worse, because that's the only person you can rely on right now. So if she's off, then you're done. Well, and then the other part is then so your secondary options are supposed to be Pau and Van Sluten. And if Pau's dealing with an injury or is just unreliable for whatever reason, that makes it difficult. And then Van Sluten's a true freshman, and she's proven to be anything but matchup prone. There are certain front court combinations that have made it very difficult for her to score. And you look at the stats this season, it's kind of, you talk about inconsistency. I think she's kind of been maybe the one that you look at just from a stats perspective and go like, yeah, it's pretty clear there, because she'll have a couple of games where she scores 18 to 22 points on like really good shooting. And then she'll have a couple of games where she scores 6 points on like 3 of 12 shooting. So, I mean, I don't know how far into the weeds we want to go on women's basketball, because I know every time we talk about it in the comments, I hear no one cares about women's basketball. The numbers I see on traffic from my stories suggest the opposite is true, and the same thing from attendance. But I know on podcasts that apparently women's basketball hasn't been a popular subject, so I don't want to shoot down an entire topic. But I could go for a long time into why I think some of these issues are there. But I want to be respectful for the time for those listening if they're just not interested in this, and we can maybe talk about men's basketball or football if that's of more interest. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm just trying to be. We've talked 10 minutes in this, and we're going to go for 40. I don't know if you want to go. I could talk for an hour if we wanted to on some of the issues, but I don't know if you.
I was just going to bring up real quick before we transition to the men here is just like, where's the confidence level with this team? Because like you said, they have 6 games left. 4 of them are on the road, and we've said this before on the podcast. We've said it also off record. Like, the league is just drastically better than what it was 4 years ago. And so you're not going to get these games where you're going to win by 25 and you're going to be able to rest your starters, every other game. What's the optimism that this team even gets to the tournament? Right now, Charlie Crean has the women as a 9 seed. In his updated bracketology, which came out today for ESPN. Doesn't look like they're on the bubble. Doesn't look like, they're close. But if you're a 9 seed, and that indicates that if things don't get turned around quickly, like, you could be on the bubble on Selection Sunday.
Well, again, and this is the point Kelly's made, the point I made earlier of they have a very clear path to making the tournament, because what's in front of them is very challenging. And you look at the schedule, and you mentioned 6 games, 4 on the road. 4 of those are against teams that are in the top 50 in the net. Those are all quad 1 caliber wins. Washington is knocking on the doorstep as another team. They just knocked off Stanford last weekend. Washington is in the 60s. So that's another game where it's at least or 70, I guess. That's a respectable opponent. Arizona State's not good. That isn't going to impact things, but that's a very winnable game.
You got to win.
Yeah, it's a game. That game you have to win. I think you have to win the Washington game. So, like, put those aside. You have to have those 2 as wins. If you lose the Washington win, that changes the whole thing here. But of those other 4 games, I think you have to win at least 2. And that means you have to win 2 of the USC, UCLA, Washington State, Arizona games. If you can do that, I think you give yourself a decent chance, assuming you win those other games. If you finish, that would put you at 9-9 in Pac-12 play. That would put you at 18-12 going into the conference tournament, or 18-11, sorry, going into the conference tournament. I think that would be enough, and you'd probably be an 8 or a 9 seed depending upon the combination of schools you beat. The issue is that they could easily lose every game on this road trip. I mean, they are slumping right now. USC, UCLA are good opponents. These are top 30 teams in the net. USC is a team they beat by 28 in January. That feels good, but then you realize their leading scorer missed that game. And you realize that, hey, it's been a long time. And since that game took place, USC's won a bunch of games. They beat Stanford as well. And Oregon's lost a lot of games. So, I mean, we'll see. I don't know. I think it's kind of a coin flip right now for me, just because you haven't seen enough consistent winning to see them go win these games over really good teams. At the same time, they haven't been outclassed once, I don't think, really all season, with the exception of maybe the Ohio State game. Ohio State, which is a top 10 team. So, I mean, I think there's reason to be optimistic they can do it, but I think there's also a ton of reasons, and we can get into, if you read our stories on duckterritory.com, you can get into more of the weeds of why. It's not going to be easy, though.
No, it certainly won't be easy. And yeah, it's a good thing that they haven't been just, outclassed or outperformed for a lot of these losses. But at the end of the day, like, they're still losing. And the way they're losing is another big differentiator. Like, they'll be up by 10 or 12, and then in the fourth quarter, they'll lose that game on a near buzzer beater or overtime, or the very opposite, where they're down 10 or 12 and they come back and they come back in a storm and showcase how they can be a team that's a threat on the offensive end, and then fall short by the buzzer, fall short in overtime, whatever the case may be. It's just I feel like a lot of their games are encapsulations of the season, where it's a good start, or it's just an up and down, and the entire each quarter is a good one or a bad one, followed by a good or a bad one. It just the team itself, like I started off by saying, it's unbelievably inconsistent. And, that really hurts in college basketball. That hurts at any professional level as well. It's just, Eric, I saw you, somebody blocked that comment. Thank you for blocking that comment. I mean, I'm not going to discuss it on the air. But yeah, I mean, cautiously optimistic. Sure. It's just, I'm not the most optimistic person in the world, but there's not a whole lot to go off of there that makes you feel like, 4 out of 6 on the road, that's doable for sure. No questions asked there. It's going to be a struggle. And I will go back to a point I made maybe even preseason or like first 2 weeks of the season where I talked about how 9 scholarship players is just not enough. It's still just not enough. It's costing them at this stage. And the minutes that they have to put on Tahina and the minutes they have to put on Rogers, like Matt mentioned, Filipina Che, it's going to be tough to finish the season out fresh. And I think you're seeing a lot of that right now during, I don't know, like what it is, the dog days in August for baseball. It's kind of like the February stretch in college basketball, if that makes any sense.
Do you want to talk men's basketball with Matt not here?
Yeah, sure. I mean,
it's kind of a weird deal. Matt is dealing with some house. What would be the
issues.
Right? Well, they're doing an overhaul on some of the housing stuff.
There was a leak, in the house. Not a good thing. A pipe burst. It's got a bunch of fans in his house no longer there.
Yeah, he might be
10 to 15 minutes. So you guys who are listening or watching have to listen to Eric and I for the 3rd time this week. I feel sorry for everybody.
So let's do men's basketball, and then there's some comments here that we could talk about with expansion and stuff that is kind of interesting. Oh, here's Matt. Thank you, Matt. You need to be the one
again.
Talking men's basketball without you would have felt really strange. We're about to start, so go. So
yeah, I actually heard everything that you guys were talking about.
Okay. So you're caught up.
But yes, let's transition to the men's side. This is great podcasting, by the way. Oregon has always is. Oregon has won 6 of their last 8, 7 of their last 10 for the men, and a season that felt like it was going to be going the same way it went last year, not making the tournament, is back on track. They're not all the way back yet. 15-10 overall, 9-5 in conference play, but they're currently tied with Utah for 4th place in the Pac-12 standings. They have the tiebreaker against the Utes. They are half a game back behind USC in 3rd place, and they have a tiebreaker with USC there as well. So everything is on the table for Oregon. As crazy as it sounds, there is still a legitimate path that Oregon can win the league. They've split with Arizona. They have a UCLA date on Saturday that if they split that, they get within a game and a half of the 1st place Bruins. And UCLA still has to play at Utah, at Colorado, Arizona State, and Arizona. Good possibility they drop 1 or 2 of those games. Now, it's going to require, near perfection for Oregon and a couple things going their way. But a month ago, we weren't even having this conversation. A month ago, it was legitimately, amongst the fan base, should Dana Altman retire? Like that's as crazy as it sounds. And yet here we are going into Saturday's game against number 7 UCLA, maybe the biggest game the Ducks have had this year. And it's quite interesting how they've kind of gotten here. They've gotten some good wins. Arizona at home was a massive win. USC Thursday night was a massive win. They got a good win at home against Utah. They blew out Colorado after getting dropped there earlier. They dropped a game at Arizona. They have the bad loss at Stanford when they lost by 7 there. But for the first time in a long time, it feels like there's some optimism with this team. There's some growth with this team. I thought they looked – Jared and I were at the game last night. I thought they looked tremendous in that one. It was a little bit of a slow start, but they straight up kicked USC's butt, and they had no answer for Oregon inside as Dante dominated. Biddle had his moments. Ware had his moments. And when they weren't scoring in the paint, they were getting to the free throw line for 16 of 18. You just kind of look at the stats of this team, and things are starting to improve. And I think for the first time in a long time, you've got some optimism that this team is going in the right direction. But like Jared has said a couple times on the show, and maybe this is just a kick way to him, like tomorrow night will be a prove it night for everybody. And if this team is the tournament team, they've got to win tomorrow night against a UCLA team in an arena that could potentially be sold out.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I mean, USC was not the best defensive team in the Pac-12, and that was that was showcased last night. But like Matt said, it was in good old-fashioned ass kicking. Started slow, but Oregon just dominated on the interior. N'Faly Dante had a clear size and strength advantage over Vincent Uwachukwu, who I am a big fan of. He just got absolutely dominated last night. It's just a freshman versus a senior at this point. And for Oregon, like I said many weeks ago, there was going to be a stretch where it was going to be hard to implement everybody back into the rotation after only having really 8 guys who could play, and including Brennan Rigsby and Luke Wurr. But it's back. They had that loss to Stanford. You lose to Arizona on the road. But again, I didn't think they played poorly at Arizona. They just ran into Azuolas for Azuolas, excuse me.
That should be his nickname.
It should be.
Zealous Tabellus is good.
Azuolas, Azuolas. I got it. He's just an animal. I mean, he's probably the Pac-12 Player of the Year. He had an unbelievable night. I think he watched 40 or 42 points. You can't really do anything about that. I still think Arizona is the cream that rises to the top in the Pac-12. But like Matt said, 7-10 is really impressive. This is a team that really didn't have a trajectory. I don't know what it was for a long portion of the season. It was like the women's team now, unbelievably inconsistent. You had good nights from Will Richardson. You had poor nights from Will Richardson. You had maybe a good night from some random role player like Quincy Guerrier. But a lot of the times you just didn't. And now that they have all 11 guys back in action and are capable of playing, they've got enough practice time, got enough game time to the point where they start to feel comfortable with each other on the floor, and things just kind of are gelling now on both sides. I wrote about this last night, I guess, early in the morning if you live on the East Coast. I was impressed with their defense overall. It started to look a little bit similar to what a Dana Altman team should look like on the defensive end. USC, other than Boogie Ellis, didn't do anything. Drew Peterson was held to 9 points. I think just 3 of 8, 3 of 9 shooting from the floor. What Oregon did was not allow USC to drive into the paint. And because of that, because of their perimeter defense with Kuznar and Barthélemy, and even a good job from Richardson, who doesn't always give his best efforts on defense, they've all bought in, and they're all proving it on the court. That's a really hard USC team to stop defensively. Oregon did it. Obviously, USC was without 2 of their guards last night, so that doesn't really help them. It helps Oregon. But those excuses didn't matter. Even if those guys played, I'm not exactly sure that USC would make it any closer. And Oregon just kicked ass for 2 hours straight. So it was a good performance. Needs to come again on Saturday, right? Saturday, yeah. Needs to come again at Saturday at 7 p.m. Oregon was completely out physical the last time they played at the Pauley Pavilion. They need to bring the same physicality they had last night into Saturday. And then it's just going to be about shot making and shot creation, and we'll see what Oregon does from there.
The UCLA game down there, I think if you're Oregon, you got to feel confident because it was an early December game. You were limited with players, and they led that game for like 18 or 19 minutes. There was a good stretch of time where it was tied, and then the second half is when UCLA pulled away. And it wasn't back and forth in that first half. Oregon trailed, I think, 6-0 in the first minute or two, but then basically went almost wire to wire in the first half with a good solid lead. And then, like Jared said, UCLA turned up the defense. Dante did not handle the double teams well. He had 5 turnovers. He battled foul trouble in the first half in that game. I remember Dana Altman post game, saying like they need more from Dante, and he said that last night after the win at USC ahead of the UCLA game. He just needs to be able to provide more for his team. But if you're Oregon, I think you go into this and there's some optimism that you match up well. You have the talent to compete with them, and you can win this game because it was on the road, and in the final 5 minutes of the game, you still had a chance to knock off the Bruins. I'm real curious just to see the level of intensity Oregon plays with, the consistency that they play with, And maybe even a bigger factor of just what the environment looks like Saturday night. Because, Jared, for the first time all year, I felt like Thursday night's game felt like a basketball game. Like, good crowd, good environment. Oregon was playing well. And we haven't seen that combination really all season. Maybe the Arizona game in parts, but it's been lacking, and it's February 10th, and yet it feels like finally now basketball season has started, for at least on the men's side.
Can I ask a question?
Go for it.
So I'm looking at their schedule here. It is so easy after UCLA.
Yes.
So I'm wondering aloud here, and I'm curious on your take on this, Matt and Jared. Let's just say it doesn't come together tomorrow and they lose to UCLA, hypothetically. I think it's very winnable as well. After that, it's 5 games against teams that are all below 80 in the net. All besides Washington have a losing record on the season. Cal is 300th in the net ranking, which is, I think, like the lowest I've ever. They're 3-21. It's like the lowest net ranking I've ever seen from a Power 5 school. Like, it's incredible that they're. I mean, being in the 200s is rare for a Power 5 team, but 300 is really low. So Oregon finishes at Washington State, at Corvallis, and then hosts the Cal and Stanford schools to close after tomorrow's game with UCLA. If they were to win all 5, and you've got this 6 out of 8 going right now, they would have been 11 out of 14 to finish the regular season. Is that enough? Like, if they get to, because that's also 20 wins on the season, is that enough, or where is the computer? Are you concerned
enough for the tournament?
Yeah, because if you don't think
they're in. If they win 11 of 14 to finish the season, they win the rest. Or after UCLA lost, they win. Yeah, 100%.
That was going to be my argument. Is like, it seems to me like the UCLA feels like a must-win, and it would certainly boost it and like probably put them in the field. But if they get really hot here and just finish off the regular season again against 5 bad teams, like, I don't think it's crazy that they could lose to UCLA and still get in. Am I wrong on that?
No.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if they lose to UCLA and they win, the final 5 games of the season, they're in 100%. I mean, they needed this finish basically exactly, and they've done it. It would be really impressive if they finish like that, 11 of 14, like you said, Eric. And then you still go into the conference tournament with a chance to line up against somebody who's maybe not as good, but as a top seed, as a top 3 seed potentially. There you go. So that's another game you add to your record. That's another game you add to your net rating. That's another game you add to your Ken Palm rating. I think Oregon is 43rd right now in Ken Palm, which is a lot better than where they were earlier in the season.
They're 50th in the net, by the way.
50th in the net. Yeah, if they go through and win 5 of their next 6, losing only to UCLA, who's a top 10 team in the country, I think they're in. And
we would be talking about like a team that's like a 10 seed.
Right.
Like,
barely.
Because right now they're 4-6 with quad 1s. And there's a couple games that are going to be fluctuating that if you're an Oregon fan, you have to root for Arizona State to continue to win. You have to root for Colorado to continue to win because you need to win at ASU to look good. You need the loss at Colorado, even if it was as bad as it was, to not turn into a quad 2 loss, which is very close to doing. Colorado is currently 68th in the net. It's a 75 or better in the net rankings for a quad 1. And then you also are rooting for Nevada because that was a home win early in the season on December 10th. Oregon kind of kicked their butts, and Nevada is fluctuating quite a bit between a quad 2 and a quad 1. And I know that's not really the best topics, but Nevada's 30th in the net rankings, and 1 through 30 is the threshold for a quad 1 game. So if you're Oregon, you are big Nevada fans this week or this season because you need them to finish. You need them to win out essentially before the Mountain West Conference tournament and stay in that top 30 range to give you that quad 1 game. And then the UCLA game tomorrow, if you're Oregon and you can say you've got 2 top 10 wins against net opponents even if they're at home, UCLA and Arizona, that's huge for your seeding purposes. And to Eric's question, like if they beat UCLA and they win out, like now we're talking about a team that maybe is going into Vegas as an 8 seed or a 7 seed with the opportunity to maybe bump up 1 or 2 lines into the field, where you maybe have a good chance at winning a game and maybe even getting a good matchup to possibly even get it to the second weekend, which is just crazy to think about from where this team was at a month ago. But it all boils down to, a lot of what happens tomorrow night. I think, to Eric's question, like if they lost to UCLA and then won out, it would be a nervous week in Vegas and on Selection Sunday. Even though you feel like you're in, like it wouldn't feel as nearly as confident as if they beat UCLA, but maybe they lost at Washington State or something like that on the road. Like if you lose to Cal, you're not in. If you lose to Oregon State on the road, You're not in. If you lose to Stanford at home, you're not in. You have to win your tournament. Those are the 3 games you absolutely have to win. You could probably sell me on losing at Washington State or at Washington as long as you beat UCLA, but it would put you kind of back into a similar situation of losing at home to UCLA and winning out, where on Sunday you're kind of like, I think we're in, we should be in, but every once in a while there's that one team where it's like, oh, wow, they're not in the tournament, and that could be you.
Well, the other thing is you're relying upon this team to take care of business against the 5 lesser teams, which that's been where they've stumbled kind of this. I mean, not against this caliber all the time, but the Stanford loss struck me as one of those, we just beat Arizona. Because the Arizona game win was right before that, I think the weekend before. And then, we go on the road, Stanford. Oh, they hadn't won a conference game until they beat Oregon State a couple of days before, and then they knock you off, and it's not a very competitive game. So I guess that's where I'd also get nervous. But, I mean, you look at the 2 situations, not that we have to go too much compare and contrast between the men's and the women's, but very different situations where the women are kind of in the field, but they have a really tough schedule and have to kind of win some games to maintain their position, whereas the men's team, they're not in the tournament, but gosh, they have this huge runway in front of them because, again, I look at those 5 games to end the season after UCLA and go like, that's about as good as you could. If Dana was scripting a season and schedule, I think he'd feel really good about kind of how this closes for him because that's a very, very winnable final 5 games.
Yeah. Well, just think about maybe we can end it here, and this is my half glass full approach to it. But if they beat UCLA, and then those final 5, they win, you're going into Vegas with an 8-game winning streak, 10 of the last 11 that you've won, and 12 of the last 13 that you've won. If they even win just 2 games, if they could get to the Pac-12 championship game on that Saturday night, even if they lose, they go into the tournament as one of the hotter teams in college basketball, having won 13 or 14 games in their last 15. It's just a total complete turn of the season, and it would be really weird to look at just the first half and the second half of how this team plays out. And that's kind of why I don't get too hot or too low with basketball in November or December, and this team sucks. It's just such a long season that we've seen with both teams, it can fluctuate up and down.
Don't write off Dana Altman in February, though. That's something we kind of need to recognize.
I think we could have just had that entire segment by saying that.
It's very true. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll join into the comment sections here and discuss some topics after the break. All right, welcome back to the Yachts and Audibles podcast. I'm unfortunately sad that Dr. Quacks, I'm disappointed by the tattoo news, had my money on being an arm sleeve tattoo of a dog leg hole from a famous golf course.
Oh,
that's interesting. I had no idea I even presented the idea of being a tattoo person. This just blows my mind.
Well, so here's what happened on last week's. By the way, he just gave you a great idea for your arm sleeve tattoo, which I know you're going to go out and get. I know you're going to go devote a bunch of money to it. No, the reason it came up is because, what was it? Last Friday, we did a live stream, and one of the questions was, do you guys have tattoos or plans to get duck tattoos? And Jared and I both put on the brave face and said, we didn't have one, but boy, you should check out Matt's arm tattoo. And people were shocked. I don't think people expected that news either. And they were shocked for good reason because it happened to be fake.
It's not true. Yeah.
It's not true.
Not a real thing, sadly.
Let's go here because this seems to be a hot topic right now. Not necessarily just how SMU fits as being a religious school, but just Pac-12 expansion in general right now. From Rick Olson, he brings it up. SMU is the hot name. A lot of national outlets, West Coast outlets, I think John Canzano, John Wilner have both reported on it. There's been like a photo of George Kliavkoff, Pac-12's commissioner, at a basketball game at SMU with what looked like athletic director at SMU and other officials for the school. Are you guys at all like piqued, interested? Does it move the needle at all with the addition of SMU possibly to the Pac-12?
Not from an on-field perspective at all. And again, I think the funny thing is we the things that seem to matter to TV company or TV communication companies like Fox or ESPN when you're talking about negotiating these media deals are things that really don't matter that much to most of the fans, because the reason you'd add SMU is not for on-field perspective at all. It would be because of the TV market you'd be putting yourself in. And I also don't really know. I haven't done the research on this. This is probably my bad for trying to comment in on it without doing so. But I don't know what SMU's, like how much of a pull they have even in that market. And like, does that really help you that much? I don't know. But that's the reason their name has been floated. It's the reason San Diego State has been floated. San Diego State's had that's been a quality program in the Mountain West. So like I understand that a little bit more. And you look at, hey, Oregon, I should say the Pac-12 had success with Utah, who was a Mountain West program that they brought up, and now suddenly Utah is winning consecutive conference championships and is clearly one of the big dogs in the conference. I wouldn't sleep on San Diego State being a program that down the line 6 to 8 years, like it took Utah, could get there. Utah was a little bit more celebrated than San Diego State, but that's San Diego State's being mentioned like SMU because of that Southern California television market. So that's why these names are being brought up. It's also why, like, do I have a lot of interest in watching SMU or San Diego State football? Probably not. Like, I'll be honest, I don't think I've watched either of those programs play unless they're playing teams on Oregon's schedule. Like, I know I watched San Diego State. What was it last year? I think they played Utah. I think they played and might have beaten Utah. Is that right? I know they played Arizona. I'm trying to think, but there was some common.
Yeah, I can't remember.
So I saw them play a little bit, but like, yeah, no, I'm like in general, like, no, I'm not super intrigued by San Diego State or SMU as teams to add from an on-field competition perspective, but you'd find TV markets, and that's clearly the root of all of this. And like, so like, am I excited by it? Not particularly, but I am understanding of why those would be targets.
Well, as we all know, this comes down to money, as it should, because everybody's just trying to make the most amount of money here. And the Pac-12 is floundering. A lot of reports coming out from Stuart Mandel about how the Pac-12 has overvalued itself and is suddenly not going to get the same amount of money allocated to the schools that it so desired, whether it be from Amazon, whether it be from ESPN or some larger network like that. Southern Methodist provides a bigger fan base, provides a bigger TV audience. That's a great part of the deal. Southern Methodist and Texas Christian, TCU, those guys control the Dallas area for college football. Then you still have Texas, you still have Baylor, blah, blah, blah. And Tech. Don't forget about Texas Tech because Oregon's playing them next year. Does it interest me? Sure. Why not? You need to add teams. In 2024, it's going to be a 10-team league. You can't go into it with 10 teams. You're just a complete lack of a conference if you have 10 teams compared to the Big 12 with 16 and the Big 10 with 16 or 18 and the SEC with 16 or 18 when Oklahoma and Texas join. There's just such a huge discrepancy between the conferences. And even though Oregon would be the brand value of the group and Washington would be as long as they're still here, it's a big difference. And there's one thing about being Clemson of the Pac-12, which is a great thing where you can go and become a conference champion. The difference is being a conference champion like Clemson and then going out and performing and competing on the college football playoff stage and winning national championships, which Oregon is trending towards. They're trying to do it. They've been trying to do it for as long as they've been a program. With Clemson, they just went out and did it. They were 12-0 conference champions. I fear that Oregon could could be a Clemson of the Pac-12, but be 9-3, 10-2 conference champions, where there's a big difference between that. Oregon would really need to step up their out of conference schedules if the Pac-12 were to go to 10 teams and stay at 10 teams. I just don't look at any of this as good news. I really don't. From my perspective, I think it's not great that George Kliavkoff is now making very public appearances with athletic directors in front of the scenes and not behind the scenes about potential expansion.
Yeah, like that was the thing. That was like the biggest shock to me was he would even put himself in a position to be seen. Like he obviously is not out there wanting to make it. No, maybe he is. Maybe that was the whole point of being there. But
I would imagine
like
it was. Don't you think? I mean, you think
there's no other point of being there. Like these guys don't just meet up for funsies unless they do. Maybe they do, but I doubt it. And plus, this has been reported for weeks beforehand about SMU might be a team to look for the Pac-12.
Well, I just think like the big moves though, like that really change and work well for whatever conference are like Oklahoma and Texas, when it was just like, oh shit, they're gone. Like they met in secret.
USC and
UCLA.
Yeah, like they met in secret. They got all things detailed, ironed out, and then the next day when it gets done, boom, it gets released, it gets leaked, what have you. Like to Jared's point, like this is a sign it's not going well, where they're trying to prop it up in a positive manner by him being visible and being seen, looking out on the road and checking out these schools and whatnot. It's just weird to me. I am much more open to the idea of San Diego State joining the conference than I am of SMU. There's like, I can't even think of one school in the current Pac-12 that has like any kind of connection or past history with SMU. Like SMU academically has a huge endowment. It's a big school. It's got a good reputation academically. It's in a big metro in the Dallas area. Obviously, that's huge. But there's just no connection whatsoever at all, regionally or on the field athletically, with the rest of the conference. It just makes it feel like it's just kind of forced, which kind of felt like Utah, Colorado, but I don't know.
There's no need for them to have a connection on the field. They're just in it for the TV market. It's just numerical values. It's money.
And to be clear, Utah, Colorado were proactive additions when the league was on fairly even footing with a lot of these conferences. The circumstances are very different. These are reactive actions trying to add these schools. These are reactions, as to Jared's point of, you'd be at 10-member schools, you get to 12, which at least puts you even with what the Big 12 becomes after they add their 4 in 2024. So at least you have the same number of schools, the same number of splits. You have somewhat comparable television markets. Big 12 is probably, if we're being honest, outmaneuvered the Pac-12 in a lot of ways and how this has gone down.
Yeah.
So I think you're just kind of trying to keep up right now. And that's why this doesn't look great. And to the point about like it not being public and all that stuff, that really doesn't bother me that much, because the USC, UCLA and the Oklahoma, Texas things, there were reasons for those things to be kept secret, right? Because those were both moves that were, well, especially the USC, UCLA one I can point to, like there was a reason that timeline of when they made the move, because it was the last day to make the move without having to pay, what was it, $100 million to the conference for leaving outside of the terms of the agreement. So like there was a reason that one was done in as a hush, as opposed to this current editions, SMU and San Diego State. Like the Pac-12 wouldn't really have to compete with the Mountain West. Like there wouldn't be as much recourse in terms of adding those teams. So I understand why that's being done publicly. I don't really have an issue with it. I just think at the end of the day, like I think what we know now is very clearly where their focus is. Their focus is on those two schools. There's been a lot of attention with SMU, and it's very clear that is the path that they're going, right? Because when this first happened, there was all of this noise and uncertainty, all of these different things. And as what happens with these big stories, as time goes by, it becomes more and more clear where the direction is headed. And I think it's pretty clear that they're going to try to add these two schools, probably do it pretty soon, because they're in, I think
they need to.
Kliavkoff has set an April something date for trying to get the new media deal finalized, and part of that media deal being able to be finalized is, I think, trying to acquire both of these schools. So my guess is in the next 2 or 3 months, we're going to see an announcement that San Diego State and SMU are added to the conference. That would be my guess. I'm not reporting that, that's just sort of where the tea leaves seem to be headed.
I think I just would have to. I mean, they absolutely need a media deal, and the longer they wait, the more less inclined I would say Amazon is to give them these types of deals. I guess they need to make these appearances public so that they can show, hey, Amazon, hey, ESPN, hey, whatever. We're trying, man. We're getting out here. We're talking cheddar. We're talking cheese with the big guys, the athletic directors. I'm George Klyakov. We can do it. We can build the Pac-12. The longer will they wait? I don't know. I worry about it because it did not take long for the Big 12 to get a TV deal from ESPN, and that was Sans, Oklahoma, and Texas. Like they got it months ago, and they got a pretty good penny. Not as much as what the Big 10 and SEC got, but again, they're a division below those, and as is the Pac-12 now without USC and UCLA. So I don't know. I don't like it. Well, I kind of do like it because I like chaos.
We don't like it in terms of like I don't like either of these schools, but it's a necessary evil for the Pac-12. And there's no alternative. So I like the fact that being proactive. I like the fact that they're making moves, but like, do I think the moves ultimately are like going to be awesome and you're going to feel really great about having a 12-team conference that has SMU and San Diego State? I think the answer for almost everybody is no.
Of course not. No. I just worry that Klyakov has probably talked a large game and has maybe bit off more than he could chew after seeing some of the recent departures and some of the lack of, I would say, general interest from Amazon and ESPN. Because if there was a lot of interest, I feel like a deal would be done by now. Because all the other conferences, when they had all their expansion and their realignment, there were plenty of interest from other cable and TV providers. Unless the reports that are coming out from the likes of Stuart Mandel and people at the Athletic and other places across the country, the interest doesn't seem to be as high. And I'm not sure this SMU and the San Diego State, I'm not sure that really pushes them over the edge either. So that's my conference realignment topic.
What do we think about Fresno State? Like,
throw them all in.
Big step.
Get 16
Is it a
people.
big step down though? Like, I guess that maybe the
who else are you gonna pull?
Question mark, normal question mark questions. But like, I guess to piggy off that question, just like this was all inventory, like you guys have said. Like, what's the end number here? Should it be just to get back to 12? Like Jared said, the league can't be at 10 in 2024, or they can't be at 10 for very long. They need to expand. So, like, if they're going to expand, what's the end number? Is it to get back to 12? Is it to go to 14? Is it 16? Because the more teams you add, the less money each team's going to get. And if I'm Oregon, if I'm Washington, if I'm ASU, I'm kind of like, I don't want to share my money straight up equally with SMU, Fresno State, and San Diego State. I wouldn't even want to share my money equally with Oregon State and Washington State and Colorado.
Which was the reason USC left.
Yes.
That's legitimately why it happened. No, and I mean, I think, no, you get to 12 if you can, you get to 14 if you can, but you're very selective here. I mean, there's no reason to bring in markets that don't provide you anything because you're talking about the slice of the pie. And ultimately, that's what matters is the final number is the final number, but you have to think about it from a member school perspective. Like, what's the cut that each school gets? And if you're Oregon, does it benefit you for the conference to add these two schools? Like, I think these, and again, this is so silly that we're looking at it like this way. And we're not the right people to be like, there are experts who know television deals and contracts and financials a lot better than 3 sports reporters covering a team in Eugene. But like the metric here that you have to look at is how much does SMU provide? How much does San Diego State provide? Okay, those are the numbers. They give you X number of dollars. Okay, you cut that into 12. Is that number more than what it is at the current state of 10, or whatever the offer would be? Okay, hypothetically, you can add these 2 more schools, Fresno State's being one of them. Let's say, I don't know, BYU. I know they're going to the Big 12, but let's just say for this hypothetical, they have a tie to Utah. Let's just say they're in the mix, or Utah State, whatever it is. I don't know. I don't think that's a good name either, but what cut does that get you? Does that bring the average up? If it doesn't bring the average up and it diminishes it, that's a losing proposition. I know there's the bigger game to look at, and you can think about, man, maybe these programs will build and it'll expand the region and everything. But like at the end of the day, that's not, I don't think, how you're looking at it. You're looking at it from a survival perspective. So you're really looking at teams that can help you now. And I don't think adding Fresno State, and I don't think adding really too many other schools that are gettable help. So if SMU and if San Diego State bring you big enough TV markets where it increases the final number from an average perspective, then yeah, I think you jump in with those. But if it's hurting you, then yeah, there's no reason to do so.
Well, the Pac-12 is caught in between a rock and a hard place because I don't think Southern Methodist and San Diego State do anything for the conference either. They're still,
if they were net negative but if they were net negative from a financial perspective, they wouldn't. They wouldn't be considered. No, but you think they're going to hurt the average number?
They have to. You're losing USC and UCLA.
Well, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the net average that is being proposed with the current 10 teams constructed.
No, because
it doesn't matter what the old schools are. This is all math.
I agree, but if you add any school, it'll up it because you're adding more markets.
I'm talking about the averages, though. The average per school.
Right. No, I understand what you're saying. Let me think for a second. Yeah, if you add SMU and San Diego State, they'll up the average. But just because you're going from 10 to 12 schools, you're going to get a bigger deal. So
if the number goes from hypothetically 300, I'm just trying to make it clear what I'm trying to get at is if the number is 350 and you add and amongst whatever the numbers, I'm not sure what the number is, but let's say it's 350 over 10 schools, that's 35 million per year. If you would add SMU and San Diego State and then it only gets you to 400, well, now you're talking about taking a cut per school. So it only makes more sense if they're more valuable than that and they get you to 450 over 12 schools, where then you're looking at a $10 million per school increase or whatever it is, $8 million.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. They're just in a rock and a hard place because there are only so many schools that are in so many big markets that don't, I would say, necessarily provide anything on the field. Like you look at Southern Methodist and you look at SDSU, those are two quality programs, but they're still not a Power 5 level football program at all, really. And if you go from there, let's say they wanted to hypothetically add some more teams, unless you're going after other Power 5 programs, there aren't a lot of really great teams. I guess there's Fresno State, but that's not that big of a market. I guess there's other schools that you can go after, but they're all Mountain West teams. They're all in lesser markets. You're losing the two biggest markets maybe in the country in USC and UCLA. So I think whatever the Pac-12 schools get right now is probably going to be a very similar number to what they get with their new TV deal, because it's going to be a net loss, in my opinion, just because no matter who you add, you could add 8 more teams to the conference and the total number will be much bigger. But like you were saying, Eric, the total payout per team divided by 10, 12, 14, 16 is going to be lower just because of who you're losing. And that's the unfortunate part. And that's why the Pac-12 is really stuck here, because it does not matter who they add. There's just not going to be the same number that they're getting right now, I fear. And unless you split it to the point where you begin to look at TV markets and then split the average annual distribution by TV markets or performance, or I don't know how they would do it. Yeah, then Oregon would get a bigger chunk of change here. But all the other schools aren't going to put up with that. They're just not. They're going to want equality. They're going to want all the same slice of the pie. And I get that is why they should. But yeah, there are schools that probably don't deserve it. They're just bigger schools than other schools and better schools on the fields. It's just not going to work. I am as I'm sure everybody who's listening and watching could tell, I am very pessimistic about where this is headed.
Well, and again, I know we don't want to go too long here, but I have additional thoughts of also, like, if you're Oregon, and could this be part of a hypothetical holdup? If you say, we need to be making this number of dollars, you guys figure it out, and the rest of the conference says no, the reaction, the reaction from but Oregon has some leverage.
Oh yeah,
if Oregon and Washington weren't in the league, you would leave behind the other schools, and then the next media deal with whatever conference that would also be smaller. So there is a level of hardball a school like Oregon and Washington can play if they want to throw their weight around. I don't know how they want to do it,
of course.
But to say, hey, if you guys can say that, cool. We're gonna find another option, and now you guys are going to be left with a smaller percentage of an equal pie for a conference that doesn't have as much of a media rights deal.
Which is what they should do.
Which is what they should do. I'm not saying I'm in agreement. So, but like this is the situation. These are the hard obstacles that Kliavkov is dealing with. The right of he's got some of the schools who probably have routes to better conferences and have some leverage, and then he has the smaller schools that he has to try to deal with too, because he has to keep it all together. Meanwhile, the Big 12 is trying to pull schools The Big Ten has already pulled schools. I don't think they're doing anything right now, but like it's a messy situation with a lot of moving parts.
They are. The Pac-12 are the scavengers, man. They're looking for anything right now, and that is not the position you want to be. And we should all write a nice handwritten letter to our dear friend Larry Scott for putting Oregon and putting the Pac-12 in this position with their dumbass Pac-12 network idea. It's ruined the conference, even though their production value is very nice.
Larry Scott.
Not good. Not good. It's going to be an interesting time to see where the league goes. Real quick, I know Jared's got to go. Yes or no? Do we have expansion by like an agreement in place? Not necessarily they've officially joined, but like, hey, they're coming in year whatever. Do we see that by the start of football season in 2023?
Yes.
So September? Yeah. I'll
yes.
go with it.
Yeah, I say yes too. Unanimous. All three of us think it. Interesting.
Yeah.
I don't think give you a.
I don't even think they can. I mean, they can't finalize negotiating this media deal. I don't think without expansion.
Yeah.
Of some kind.
No one's going to take them up on the offer.
Well, and Oregon might also figure, or Pac-12 might also figure we can get a better offer.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
All right, it's going to do it for us here on the Odds and Audibles podcast. Thank you for listening to the show. Thank you for watching on the live stream, asking your questions there as well. We'll be back on Monday with another mailbag edition of the podcast. And until then, you've been listening to the Odds and Audibles podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.
Peace.